Good afternoon, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Vishal Mathur. I work for the Telecom Infra project. So the topic is diversity is the secret weapon in the war for talent. What I'm going to start with is that this is not just about talking about race, age, identity, and gender equality. It's a broader topic than that. That's part of it. Really what we're doing is we're managing a skill shift in the telecom sector. So from our perspective in TIP, and we'll talk a little bit briefly about who Telecom Infra project is, but we are effectively going through a shift in the way networks are being built. And you've heard today, I managed to join some of the afternoon sessions. There's a lot of great talk about transitioning from a single vendor to a multi-vendor, interoperable, integratable, cloud-native, automated system that exposes capabilities. So we're going to have to establish a skill shift across the telecom sector, effectively with a workforce that's able to evaluate, define, architect, build, test, deploy, manage, optimize these networks in a multi-vendor operating environment. Remember that. And I would say that there's going to start to be a blend of pure telecom engineering skills with potentially IT, cloud, and development skills. And let's say in the UK, there are some chronic issues. There's an aging workforce in the telecom sector. We actually only have 3% of females in the telecom sector as well, so we need to administer that. And actually, my proposal to you is that it's all about ensuring that we have the best skills and talent on hand to do the job, irrespective of age, race, identity, etc. So that's my proposal, but I'm going to carry on. And I work at an industry level, so I have the naive and ignorant, but also the opportunity to talk at an industry level. So this is all about us effectively working together as a multi-sector agency in driving this. But let's just start from the beginning. The fact is, we know that this shift is happening, and there's a lot of government attention on driving forward supply diversification to build secure, resilient networks. It's hot on the industry agenda, it's hot on government agendas as well. And on the right side, you see just quite a few examples of this happening. We know what's happened in UK. DCIT has been investing heavily in driving forward various competitions in this space, and the US has done the same thing. But there are other funds coming out and competitions coming out. The supplies landscape as well is broadening and deep, and there's more depth in it because there is more definition of disaggregation. We heard on the last panel the ideology of disaggregation in the telecom network, but actually this is just an example from TIP's Open RAN community, where you see quite a few service providers on the left-hand side. And when you look at the supply landscape, there are a number of large and potentially smaller vendors coming out in different parts of the system of RAN. And then on the right side, a number of integrators fashioning out in different ways. You're very welcome to join this community, but the whole idea is that this community is working actively and leading through on trying to drive forward the productization of these systems. Okay, so what are we shifting here? I mean, we're shifting to a multi-vendor operating environment, and that is a journey. Many CSPs are used to the fact that they work with a single vendor who manages the overall network topology, the performance, the innovation and release cycle. And that's actually institutionally the best way to work at the moment. There's been a lot of great effort, and it has built the networks of today. But the shift is inevitable. It is happening, but it leads to a more sort of complex environment. Because let's be honest, they're operators, they're integrators, and there's a level of control that needs to be managed through this in terms of how do you manage a multi-vendor, interoperable, integrated system, which actually has continuous lifecycle management, because networks need to stay up to date to be offering the solutions to consumers and citizens. So that life cycle is linear, but it's actually hazardous. But there's it's a life cycle of some sort that is recognizable. Who is TIP? So we're an industry association. We have 650 odd members. Our job is really to act as a facilitator for the industry. We have a board membership that actually is representative of a fairly heterogeneous mix of different types of industry players, large players actually, who are driving forward the strategy. But our job as a facilitator is to aggregate and roadmap the common set of requirements that are being addressed in the industry on being able to solution through Open RAN or Open Optical Packet Transport or Open Wi-Fi. These are domains of work that are happening in the industry. Our community is the one who does the job. We're just the facilitators. But as a part of that, we coordinate demand and supply, roadmap it through in the most sort of pragmatic way and come out with a marketplace of carrier-grade certified solutions that can be procured and deployed. The whole idea really is to create that marketplace, but to create competition in the market and to offer a podium for small and large players to come and be part of that ecosystem. Final point, number 4, is to actually do this in such a way that we reskill and upskill the industry through the process. So these are our key programs: Open RAN, Open Optical Packet Transport, Open Wi-Fi. You wouldn't believe it, there is disaggregation happening in every part of a network, offering up great innovative solution stacks as a part of that. But road mapping, easing the way testing and validation happens, enabling procurement and upskilling are part of the key sort of asset base that you need at an industry level. One derives benefit from that in terms of ROI. Okay, well, let's get back to skills and diversity as an outcome is my sort of proposal. So look, I mean, we noticed when talking to our board members and talking to various other members that, yeah, there are sort of 3 broad categories of skill challenge. One is the scaling of these types of telecom network shift and the adoption of it is hampered by the lack of the immediate skill base that's there, and actually being able to help to transition through this multi-vendor environment. Second is recruitment and retention of talent, and I think it was mentioned as a question about how do you retain new talent in an aging workforce is part of the skill challenge. And thirdly, there's no real clear industry level certification program on being signposting people's own learning journeys, etc. Let's just think about, as I mentioned, there is already the compounding effect of a shift in pure telecom engineering skills that one learns in engineering schools and blending with specialist IT, cloud, and software development skills. Because we are softwareizing, we're virtualizing, we're cloudifying the networks. Look, this is an opinion. This is not the be-all and end-all. You can take a picture of this, but this is just a sort of a landscape view of the fact that, broadly speaking, there are job requirements out there that need to be, looked at. And I'm taking Open RAN perhaps as maybe the primary area here, because RAN is the most complex part of the telecom network. But solution architects, system test engineers who actually understand Open RAN, through to those who can manage vendors in a multi-vendor environment, through to actually having DevOps skills with lifecycle management skills to be able to manage and networks in an optimal fashion. Not far away would be further disaggregation in the stack. When you look at hardware and chipset, product design and software engineers in that space. Mixture of cloud environments, operator, public, private, hybrid. These require skill base around how do you manage multi-cloud environments and manage the data that exists within that. And then continuing on in terms of network intelligence and performance management with AI, ML skills in that mix where new applications, XApps, RApps are coming out. Not too far away, will we see more hybrid networks coming out where we can start to see cellular and Wi-Fi and fixed really truly bringing out public, private cloud, private networks? Quantum compute and cybersecurity, I don't even know what quantum compute means. I think Maria told me once upon a time, I've forgotten. And then we talk about 6G coming up in the future. What does that mean? I don't really know, but maybe it's much more about the architectural and data skills around that. TIP launched the TIP Academy last year. This is in conjunction with Accenture. It's a platform and a framework. It's only a catalyst, though, because it's not the be-all and end-all, but it's there to try and drive an upskilling and reskilling agenda. And what we're doing is we're trying to make it agnostic. It's not vendor-specific or operator-specific. It's industry-led. And the idea is to try and develop a curriculum that telecom professionals in and out of job can start to really use and start to get familiar with these types of new equations that are coming through. And let's be honest, you know, when you have radio engineers who've been there in their job for 20 years or so, it's a hard thing. It's complex and challenging when you're being tasked to go and architect Open RAN. So there's got to be a fundamental shift in understanding there. What we're trying to do is do this in the most pragmatic way. So you remember that implementation cycle. Any given organization would be at certain stages of that implementation journey, whether it's an operator, whether it's an integrator, or even a vendor for that matter. But the idea is to try and be very thoughtful about the fact that there are different job roles out there that need to be brought about in the future. So I'm sorry about this very complex slide, but this is just effectively showcasing a curriculum that was designed in TIP Academy with the whole purpose of giving bite-sized packaged curriculum and certified models for people, for individuals, in job, out of job, for professionals who basically have been given the task by their line manager, you need to create a business case around Open RAN because we need to be doing this. Or you need to find out who are the vendors out there that can help us. Evaluate how do you actually architect or look at the different architectural options on virtualizing your DU-CU stack or actually looking at different RU propositions on frontal. Work out what do you need in the lab to actually do proper testing at the component, subsystem, and system level. So it's fairly technical in nature. It leads to a technical skill set in the future. Idea is that you go from knowledge acquisition to actual skill acquisition. So what we look for are companies within TIP membership or outside the membership who are already leading edge in this, who actually want to come and contribute in their abilities into an industry curriculum. Because that's where you learn. You learn from the best in the industry. So when you get to gold level, if I was sitting there, God forbid, as a advanced test engineer or a solution architect, and I go to something around RIC development, RIC and XApps development, I'm not going to understand much if it's just given to me by an instructor who comes as a professor, but I would learn a lot more from the likes of VRV, Acceleran, VMware, Nokia, Juniper, even Sonic Labs, who've been doing a lot of stuff like that, who actually are doing this work because this industry is still maturing. My final slide, almost. I said that TIP Academy is just one of many types of ways of learning and skill development. I purposely believe that, and I'm going to provoke this in talking to DCIT and talking to any other sort of agencies, that actually this requires a number of different, a collaborative approach to really drive a shift. And a shift that is driving a diverse employee base in the telecom industry. My whole point here is that the government, or at a national level, would play a role in increasing the employability, really assessing the immediate and future skills gaps and addressing the barriers through forming multi-agency skills councils, stimulating collaboration through grants, attracting international expertise, because it doesn't all reside domestically. Industry, and when I'm being broadly speaking industry, I'm talking operators, vendors, integrators, et cetera, who are commercially driven to drive these changes. There needs to be a change in the way they look at skill development. We need to, contribute our expertise into programs like TIP Academy, address the barriers to recruitment, specifically maybe even lowering the barriers for certain types of jobs. It doesn't all have to be an MSc, is my point. Retention programs, mentoring programs, all for like women in tech, for example, are all very important as a part of this. But this is all about getting reskillers, upskillers, and new talent in and retaining that talent. Because let's be honest, the positive impact here for a millennial coming out, and I'm, again, might be the wrong word here, but someone coming out of university who's got Google or a telco to look at, how do you retain them? So the retention might be based on the fact that actually this is a transformation journey. It's a journey where the telecom industry is moving to the techco, or whatever you want to call it. And in that respect, the software development and IT skills become just as relevant as core network engineering. And the blending of both becomes a very important part of that transformation and their worth. So it just allows then a little bit more conversation with the HR teams and talking about how do you create a little bit more opportunity beyond the standard job out there, apprenticeships, scholarships, etc. The final part is education, and that's obviously broader. I'm not talking about primary school. I don't know how to address getting a child at 6 years old to come into the telco industry. That's a hard job. But certainly in our conversations through TIP Academy with universities, undergrad, postgrad, there's certainly a certain need that we can create elective programs for our MSc and BSc students. That's great. I would love for them to understand Open RAN. But it needs to be designed in conjunction with core industry who might be there available saying, we've got a number of opportunities, we'd like to bring new talent in and offer them those opportunities. So job placement is very key. That requires that connection. And again, education, at least in the university sense, creates an opportunity for innovation to come through. So innovation in R&D, innovation in new skills. That's it. My last plug, come to Fuse. That's the TIPS event in Madrid. It's not about skills only, it's about the whole industry change agenda. And therefore, it's a fairly global event in that respect. Come to Madrid instead of London. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vish. And food. It's about food as well, right?
It is, actually, yeah. It was known for its food last year, and whether we can afford that amount of food is another thing.
Yeah, well, that's all I know. Not all I know, to be fair.
Good.
So, do we have any questions? Okay.
I don't have all the answers. I'm hoping you have some of the answers.
That's okay. Did I understand right that you want to charge for those courses in the academy?
Yes, we do.
Then I'm wondering why.
Why?
Yeah, because I spent a little bit of time in the crypto world. That is very difficult industry, cryptography and all the rest new technologies. The companies or projects that work in that space, they finance educational courses, they pay to instructors, they subsidize events and courses and venues, and everybody just shows up, and that actually creates a lot of movement and adoption.
Absolutely.
Why don't you do the same?
Oh, we will. Yeah, so there are a few companies that are joining in and they want to offer scholarships. Therefore, they're subsidizing the training of new talent to join their company. As a platform, the reason why we're charging for it is at the moment purely because of, I guess, the quality of content is still relatively unique and differentiated. Our charging model can be much more, easy to access, let's put it that way. So I don't think it's worth giving things free on the basis of trying to stimulate an industry alone. I think the free model actually doesn't create the right sort of perception. You have to put some sort of charge to it to create some sort of sense of need and urgency. It's about what the price is what it comes down to, in my mind. Challenge back.
Yeah, well, to be frank, I will disagree because you mentioned competition between, say, telco and Google. So for those millennials and graduates, they will go for that something which has a hype, and free is often part of that hype.
No, absolutely. So I think when it comes, it's about targeting. So at the moment, this is targeted towards telecom professionals in job. So therefore, it's more of a corporate buying process. We have discount strategies for, the unemployed, for example, or people in universities, scholarship programs. It's still being built out propositionally. So I think, in my mind, at the moment, it's content. There's curriculum. How you take it to market depends upon who you're trying to drive forward. So, at the moment, we're still finding our feet, and we're targeting the telecom industry as a whole. I think what we'll find is, what I would love to see is it being used as a content framework, and then working alongside universities or agencies in government or industry to try and create new models for using that content.
Any other questions? So I've got one.
Yes.
I was quite, I liked your philosophy at the end, your last slide showing the need to coordinate with government, industry, education.
Yep.
TIP is just one part of
Yes.
the sector. So
Yep.
are you working with other organizations to liaise with each of these?
Well, we're learning to, I guess. I mean, at least in UK, plugged into UK TIN. So working, and tomorrow we're forming a skills council to try and understand what can be done. Bite-sized sort of things like ambassador programs is one thing, but I'm proposing, could we do something like this? And certainly talking to DCIT to see, what's their active view on driving immediate skills development or reskilling development versus future stuff. Working with USAID as well. So USAID have been driving a digital inclusion strategy globally, and they want to do skills development as a part of that push. So we're working together in Indonesia and Philippines in Southeast Asia, and various other sort of agencies out there. Either they are commercial entities that sell training, or they're non-profit agencies as well. Universities as well, so worked across with universities in Brazil and Peru to try and develop elective programs with the idea of scholarship as well. So these are all things that TIP can do in this setting, but really the whole ideology is, at the moment, TIP Academy was set up with the vision of trying to drive an impactful way to transform the industry so that it can deploy more and scale more of open network solutions. Is that okay? Great.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. Me, as a telco engineer, Brazilian, I would like to know how are you bringing more females to the industry? Because I think you mentioned 3% only here in the UK. I'm actually surprised. I thought it would be a little bit higher, but what are you doing for bringing more girls?
I'm not doing anything, I don't know, but all I can suggest is that as far as we've seen so far is mentoring and ambassador programs of champions out there who actually are influencers, to help them to get them, seed their message out on why they joined the industry and what they're doing in the industry and what more can happen in the industry is part of that equation, but I don't think that's the be-all and end-all. I personally don't know. I would love to hear from everyone else, if anyone else has any views. But I personally think it's one of those chronic issues that should be looked at. But as rightly mentioned, go on, Maria. Thank you.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, Vish, but having been in Fuse last year, there were quite a few activities on the side, maybe not part of the main agenda, but obviously everybody was invited to join. I attended a breakfast, which I remember very fondly because it was a diversity breakfast.
Yeah.
It was mainly about gender diversity, but to be honest, when we got into the discussion, it was really about all forms of diversity. Actually, one of the comments is that it wasn't very inclusive because it was at 8 a.m. and most women had to bring their children to school. So, but that's a different problem. But all in all, I mean, that was just one example, but there were many other examples. The whole conversation, and I really liked, and there were a lot of men involved, by the way, who wanted to be sponsors. I like the term sponsor that breakfast brought up. And it brought it to light to me because I had heard that term before and I hadn't realized what it was. It's different to a mentor in that a mentor will help you throughout your career. A sponsor actually, I remember the phrase, will drop your name when it really matters. And it's because they know you, they know your career, they know you're going to be really good at some job and they will just mention your name, perhaps at the right moment in the right place. And again, it's not just about dropping a lady's name, it's just dropping, the name of somebody who could really join and bring diversity to an area where perhaps there isn't so much. So anyway, that's just one example. I think there were a few others, and I don't know if there is still that program. I'm looking forward to it in October, but that's just one example of what they do.
There will be. I was going to say, so part of this for me is, that's my fault, is actually, I'm trying to harken on the fact that there are skills that are required in the industry that should be available irrespective of age, gender, race, identity. So diversity ends up potentially becoming a useful outcome, but you do need a number of different influences to try and put the right sort of principles in place and the frameworks in place to try and enforce that. And sponsoring programs, diversity panels, champions will help to seed that and stimulate that, I think. But that's just theory, and I'd love to have more views on that. It would be great.
Any final questions? One here, please.
Hi, Vish. Thanks for the presentation. It was really interesting to see. My question is, there's a lot of different platforms targeting education. Why do you see a need for another platform rather than collaborating with platforms that already exist? I mean, you've got university platforms, you've got EDX, a lot of different ones that are tackling technology-based courses. So why yet another platform?
Well, I mean, purely because if you're talking about TIP Academy, then the whole idea is that it's meant to just be something to stimulate the industry, because actually what it's bringing together is something that isn't realizable yet at an industry level, which is this shift in how telecom networks are being built for the future. Therefore, we can leverage a community of experts, large and small organizations that are already trying to drive this. So it's just a platform that will and should, in my mind, not be the only one, but it needs to work with other educational platforms. It's, as I mentioned, it's content. It's good, rich content that should be usable in any form. There's plenty of stuff out there about this is how you do a 5G network or a 4G network, and here's 3GPP standards and all that. But no one's talking about open and disaggregated network solutions, per se, except an operator might be teaching within their own sort of organization, or a vendor is, or whatever it might be. Great, thank you very much.